What if the most profound knowledge is not learned, but remembered? What if truth does not descend through pages, but rises from the depths of the soul when the veil of the self is lifted? Ibn Arabi calls this Ilm al Ladun knowledge, granted directly by the divine, beyond teachers, beyond books, beyond language. Know that knowledge is not what is gathered, but what is unveiled. The books speak, but they do not reveal unless the heart is ready to listen. There exists a knowledge that does not come from ink or speech, a knowing that is breathed into the soul by the one who knows all things without letters or sound. This is Ilm al Ladun, divine knowledge from the presence of God. The seeker believes that truth lies ahead, waiting to be reached, but the knower realizes that truth was always within, veiled only by the illusion of separation. Books are maps, but divine knowledge is the land itself. One may memorize every map and still never arrive. Ibn Arabi teaches that God discloses himself according to the capacity of the heart. The heart that is crowded with certainty cannot receive revelation, for it leaves no space for wonder. But the heart emptied of ego becomes a mirror, and in that mirror, the divine reflects his knowledge directly. Understand this well. Ilm al Ladun does not contradict Howard knowledge. It completes it. The law disciplines the body, theology sharpens the intellect, but divine knowledge awakens the soul. When these are separated, imbalance is born. When united, wisdom walks upon the earth. This knowledge is not granted by effort alone. It is gifted through surrender. When the seeker ceases to claim ownership of understanding, understanding begins to speak through him. The self steps aside, and meaning arrives without announcement. The prophet Moses sought knowledge through effort and law, yet Keter possessed knowledge without formal learning. This is not superiority, but function. One moves by command, the other moves by permission. Both serve the divine will, but through different doors. Ilm al Ladun is not taught, it is recognized. It appears as sudden clarity, as certainty without argument, as peace without explanation. It does not shout, it settles. Those who possess it speak little, because truth does not need decoration. Their silence teaches more than many sermons. Their presence carries meaning even before their words arrive. Beware of seeking this knowledge for power or distinction. The moment the ego desires it, the door closes. Divine knowledge only descends where there is humility, patience, and love without condition. Ibn Arabi reminds us, God is not known by accumulation, but by annihilation. When I dissolves, knowledge remains, and what remains is not yours, but his. So do not ask how much you know, ask how much of you has disappeared, for when the knower is gone, the known reveals himself. Knowledge is not something that enters the human being from the outside. Rather, it is something that awakens from within when the veils are lifted. The common mind believes that learning is accumulation, that wisdom increases as words increase. But this is only true for the surface of understanding. Divine knowledge does not expand intellect, it dissolves it until only awareness remains. Ibn Arabi speaks of a knowing that does not rely on memory or logic, a knowing that arrives whole, without steps, because it does not travel. When the heart is purified from self-interest, knowledge does not need to be searched for, because it was never absent. What people call ignorance is not a lack of information, but a presence of noise. The ego speaks constantly, interpreting, judging, labeling, and as long as this voice dominates, revelation has no space to descend. Silence is not the absence of sound, but the absence of the one who wants to control meaning. When that controller weakens, knowledge emerges naturally, as light appears when clouds disperse. This is why the saints often speak of forgetting more than learning, of unknowing as the true doorway to wisdom. Books can prepare the vessel, but they cannot pour the wine. The heart must become receptive, emptied of claims, expectations, and pride. Only then does knowledge rise from the depth of the soul like a spring that was always flowing beneath the surface, waiting for the ground to crack open. Divine knowledge is not granted according to intelligence, scholarship, or effort alone, but according to receptivity. Ibn Arabi explains that God reveals himself differently to each being, not because truth changes, but because mirrors differ in clarity. A dusty mirror does not reflect less light because the sun is weak, but because the surface is obscured. The human heart functions in the same way. When desire, fear, and self-importance dominate, the reflection becomes distorted. When the heart is cleansed through sincerity, patience, and surrender, revelation becomes effortless. This is why two people can hear the same words, read the same text, and walk away with entirely different understandings. Knowledge does not descend into the ear, it descends into the heart, and the heart only receives what it is prepared to hold. Preparation here does not mean study alone, but ethical refinement and spiritual humility. The one who believes he already knows cannot receive more, because certainty has sealed his vessel. The one who remains open, trembling before the mystery, becomes a dwelling place for insight. Divine knowledge is not dramatic, it is subtle. It arrives as calm certainty rather than excitement, as inner alignment rather than intellectual victory. The knower does not feel superior, but smaller, because every unveiling reveals how vast reality truly is. This humility is not taught. It is produced by direct encounter with truth. Outward knowledge disciplines behavior and sharpens understanding, but inward knowledge transforms being. Ibn Arabi never rejected scholarship or law. He placed them in their proper place. External knowledge builds structure, but structure alone cannot generate life. A perfectly built house remains empty until someone lives within it. Divine knowledge is the presence that inhabits form and gives it meaning. When law is separated from inner awareness, it becomes rigid and lifeless. When spirituality separated from discipline, it becomes chaotic and misleading. True wisdom rises when the outer and inner are united, when practice and presence walk together. The scholar who lacks inward unveiling may speak correctly yet remain distant from truth, while the mystic who lacks grounding may feel deeply yet misunderstand reality. Ilm al Ladun does not abolish learning, it illuminates it from within. It turns information into insight and ritual into remembrance. Through it, actions gain depth, words gain weight, and silence gains authority. This knowledge does not seek to argue or persuade. It simply is. Its proof is transformation, not debate. Where it appears, character changes, compassion deepens, and attachment loosens. The person becomes less concerned with being right and more concerned with being aligned. Such knowledge cannot be claimed, because the moment it is claimed, it withdraws. The story of Moses and Keter reveals that divine wisdom operates on multiple levels simultaneously. Moses represents knowledge acquired through command, laud, and responsibility, while Keter represents knowledge received through permission and direct insight. Neither path invalidates the other. They fulfill different functions within the divine order. Ibn Arabi uses this story to demonstrate that not all truth is accessible through reasoning or moral logic. Some actions appear incomprehensible until their inner reality is disclosed. Divine knowledge does not always explain itself to the intellect, because the intellect is not its primary recipient. This creates discomfort for those who rely exclusively on rational frameworks, but it also opens the door to deeper trust. Trust does not mean blind acceptance. It means recognizing the limits of one's perspective. The ego demands clarity before surrender, while the heart surrenders in order to receive clarity. Keter does not justify himself until the end, because justification belongs to the mind, while wisdom belongs to timing. This teaches that not all truths are meant to be immediately understood, and not all knowledge is meant to be public. Some wisdom is situational, some is personal, and some is only revealed after endurance. Divine knowledge respects readiness. More than curiosity, the greatest obstacle to divine knowledge is not ignorance, but the desire to possess knowledge. Ibn Arabi repeatedly warns that seeking unveiling for power, status, or distinction turns light into darkness. The ego can spiritualize itself, using sacred language to reinforce its own importance. True divine knowledge dissolves the sense of ownership entirely. The knower does not feel that knowledge belongs to him, rather, he feels that he belongs to the knowledge. This is why saints often flee recognition and conceal their states. Exposure feeds the self, and the self is the veil. Annihilation of ego is not self-hatred, but self-forgetfulness. When the eye loosens its grip, perception widens. What remains is not emptiness, but presence. Knowledge flows without effort, speech rises without planning, and action aligns without calculation. This is not loss of individuality, but freedom from limitation. The human being becomes a passage rather than a container, a mirror rather than an object. In this state, knowing and being are no longer separate, and the distinction between learner and knowledge dissolves.